Hello and welcome to the 159th edition of the Illegal Motion College Football Podcast. In Nashville, Tennessee, I'm the professor, Matt Perkins. And joining me, a Trevor Lawrence fade across the Harpeth River, here in the Music City, it's our own offensive coordinator, the coach, Corey Burton.
So quick question, this fade route, do I have to jump for it or not?
Yeah, it's a fade stop, so you're going to have to jump for it.
Fade stop, back shoulder. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Sorry, you might have to battle off the defensive back. He'll probably have his hands all over you while you're doing it.
Good. I was hoping so.
I know you like to get a little physical out there in the secondary.
Oh, I do. Totally.
Well, speaking of physical, the third amigo in the second city, a man who finds it appropriate that Liberty's punter got ejected for targeting this weekend. It's our intrepid blogger from Big Ten and Counting, Josh Cook.
I had not even heard that. That's hilarious.
Yeah, you need to go watch this clip ASAP. I mean, this kid does the textbook spearing. He basically launches himself like a missile head first, hands at his sides at the returner. Like,
gotta bring him down. Somehow.
I mean, he must have just got done watching Varsity Blues.
So yeah, it was pretty rough. But despite what at first glance seemed to be a relatively weak slate of games for week 2, we ended up having a really great Saturday of football. We'll get to some of the headliners here in a minute. But before we get started off with our quick slants, we're just going to do a quick recap of our spread formations. Josh, I've got some bad news.
I had a horrendous weekend all over the map.
Yeah, you went over. Oh. Yeah, Coach, not much better. You're 1-4, but thanks to backing the Jayhawks, I was 3-2 on the weekend, baby. The Jayhawks snapped their 46-game losing streak on the road, rock chalk all the way. I'm now 4-6, while both of you guys are 2-8. None of us are exactly off to our hottest start, but the season is long, so we've got a long way to go from there. So with that out of the way, Josh, I'm going to throw a slant your way.
All right. Well, my first slant is going to be a little Tobacco Road two-step. Duke and North Carolina, two pretty bitter tastes in their mouth after this weekend of football. Duke beat Northwestern on the road. That sounds good, but two pretty significant injuries. Key cornerback by the name of Gilbert goes down. That appears to be a season-ending injury, and Duke's dynamic quarterback, Daniel Jones, his is not a season-ending injury, but it's going to be a lengthy one. In our preview, we talked about Duke being pretty thin. I'm struggling to see how they keep this thing together with those two mammoth injuries, which is too bad because the Northwestern win put them at 2-0. The other Tobacco Road aspect of this is North Carolina. They went to Greensboro, North Carolina, to take on our Purple Pirates, who lost to an FCS member a week ago. And the Mad Hatters team came out and laid an egg. They lost 41-19, and it was ugly. The Pirates put up over 500 yards of offense, 26 first downs. They were great on fourth down, no turnovers. Just the defense for North Carolina it's atrocious. And I just think that this, if it's not rock bottom, it's pretty dang close. And I think the Hatters' days are certainly numbered.
Yeah, they did not look good either against Cal last week. So, Coach, I previewed some FCS games before the weekend, and I know you were watching a couple of them this weekend with a couple of schools that had upset bids in mind.
Yeah, so let me set the scene for you guys, all right? So Clemson A&M, big headliner, right? All right, so what we thought was going to be a relatively boring weekend. So you look at the ACC, Virginia Tech versus William & Mary, took care of business, 62-17, all right? Miami, Savannah State. Miami 77-0. All right. Wake Forest 51-20 over Towson. Boston College 62-14 over Holy Cross. Right. Syracuse 62-10 over Wagner. Louisville 31-7 over Indiana State. And then you get down to mighty Florida State Seminoles, 36-26. And the headline is Francois saves Seminoles with a go-ahead touchdown and 2-point conversion. So let me ask you this. What conference does the Samford Bulldogs play in?
SoCon, I believe.
SoCon, and that is in what division of football?
FCS.
FCS. So you ask yourself, why is Florida State struggling? Well, I'll tell you why. Because, A, this is probably the most undisciplined team I have ever seen wearing garnet and gold. Bowden is probably just shaking his head in shame. Two, to go along with that, this might be the worst offensive line I've ever seen a Power 5 school have. Secondly. Thirdly, Willie Taggart is a mess. He inherited a bit of a mess. He inherited a very talented but very undisciplined team. And here you go. You know, what I watched of this game, Samford, to put it to you this way, Samford was the better team in this game, sadly. They were all over the map. Offensively, Samford was doing a lot of great things. I actually put something in my game plan this week for Gallatin based off something I saw the Samford Bulldogs do. So it's amazing. Like, Georgia played Samford last year. Obviously didn't struggle, but Samford, they can move the ball. They're an air raid team. Hal Mummy, disciple Chris Hatcher's their head coach, the Hatch Attack. But like, it's an FCS school. They have 20 less full scholarships than you do, and they don't get any 5 stars. And they have Florida State has 5 stars everywhere. So this is really, really unacceptable. Okay, so that's ACC. Now, there was a game I flipped to during the Georgia game occasionally during commercial breaks where I was watching, and all of a sudden I'm looking, and Matt, you were sitting right there with me, and I was like, is this correct? I look over, same scenario in the SEC. Tennessee 59-3, Alabama 57-7, but they played an FBS team. I look over and I say, Matt, is that score right?
Yeah, we had to double check that. What was it at that point? Like 30-35 or something like that?
It was 42-38, and Southern Illinois was in the lead. Now, Ole Miss ended up winning 76-41 and pulled away a little bit. But, I mean, talk about a wake-up call. Now, it was probably obvious that they were just looking ahead to Alabama. They were kind of sleepwalking in this game, which is never excusable. But it is, at least it's like, okay, I get it. That's cool. But Southern Illinois, they surprised me a little bit. They played above their heads. They put 41 up on that Landshark defense. But, luckily for Ole Miss, they have A.J. Brown. And Jordan Teamu was 23 of 33 for 448 and 5 touchdowns. So that's a rather productive day for him. So they get off the hook a little bit. But, again, at one point, Southern Illinois in the third quarter was leading this game. So hats off to them. And then there's a couple games I'm going to preview here in a little bit. But, Matt, I'll give you the floor.
All right. Well, for my first slant, I want to take a quick look at the 2 games that I previewed from the American on last week's show. We're going to start in Annapolis, where the Middies returned to the mainland and found their winning ways in an upset over Memphis, 22-21. There was a huge comeback in the fourth quarter by Navy on the back of quarterback Malcolm Perry. In this game, he ran the ball 36 times for 166 yards and 2 scores. The Middies were able to completely dominate time of possession in this one. Memphis held the ball, check this, for 17 minutes in the game. And they only ran a total of 49 offensive plays. Now, Memphis is a team that you are used to seeing run, 75, 80, 85 plays in a game. To only run 49, that is absolute dominance when it comes to time of possession. When the Tigers did have the ball, they found a lot of success in the running game, though. Darrell Henderson went off. He had 212 yards and 3 touchdowns on only 13 carries, but they were not able to get the passing game going like they were last week. Elsewhere, as predicted here, Buffalo beat Temple in Philadelphia to send the Owls to an 0-2 start. Bulls quarterback Tyree Jackson was, again, excellent. He threw for 275 yards and 3 scores. And Buffalo's defense was able to turn Temple over 3 times and hold them to a total of 350 yards. This score makes the game seem closer than it really was, though, and that's in large part due to a block punt for a touchdown when Buffalo was basically in the shadow of their own goalpost. Buffalo had nearly twice as many first downs as Temple, held the ball for 11 and a half more minutes than the Owls. Things are not going to get any easier for Temple either, though. They head to College Park next week to take on the Maryland squad that is looking very good in the early part of the season. Josh, before you get to your second slant, though, I know you have a couple questionable coaching decisions from the weekend.
I do, and I spotted 4 of them, so we'll break it up. We'll do 2 now and then 2 after slants. So, Coach, the first one is USC Stanford. Stanford obviously won it 17-3. And my question for you is, Men of Troy had all punts and 2 interceptions after their lone score to start the second half. And my question for you is, on some of these punting drives, when their defense is hanging in there and forcing Stanford to punt, why didn't they go for any fourth down conversions? Because they had a few short ones. They had a 4th and 2 at their own 31. They had a 4th and 3 at their own 21. They had a, where was that last one? There it is. So, I mean, I know those aren't ideal field positions, but I'm just sort of thinking about some of the gambles Brett Bielema made on really timely fake punts or aggressive plays. Don't you think that would have jump-started the offense in any way?
It could, but it could have turned really south in a hurry, especially the one on the minus 21. So I get that. I get a few of those, but at some point you just got to say, hey, we got to let it rip and we got to get some sort of spark. You know, the closer you get to midfield, you know, that's perfect, you know, fake punt range, or, you know, maybe you just try one of your special plays, or, you know, just something that will get the offense ignited. So I understand that in some scenarios, you know, you play that field position battle and you force Stanford to, you know, drive the field and hope that they can get some more mistakes in there. But I can't fault him on every single one of them. I'll be honest.
And then my other one for this part, Coach, is Purdue's loss to Eastern Michigan on the drive to set up the game-winning field goal. Eastern faced a 4th and 15. Purdue rushed 3, dropped 8 in the prevent defense, and it prevented them from winning because on that 4th and 15, well, they gave up a 23-yard pass. So my question for you is, why do teams continue to do that, and what is a better solution in the future?
Put pressure. I mean, you don't have to bring the house by any stretch, but again, if you give talented quarterbacks all day, people are going to get open. And I hate the prevent defense. I think you've got to get some sort of pressure on that quarterback. So you got to bring something.
Yeah, even if you're bringing 4 with 3 men, it's really hard to do any sort of like stunts or twists along the line. But even if you're bringing 4 guys, you can do, you know, a couple stunts, a couple twists with the guys, and that, you know, that it makes it a lot tougher for the offensive line in that situation. So even if you just bring 4 guys, it's a lot better than bringing 3. All right, Josh, what have you got for your second slant?
Yeah, my second slant is 2 Big Ten teams that they have at least the defense through 2 games to maybe put a scare into Wisconsin. That is Iowa and Minnesota. Hawkeyes forced Iowa State into 4 of 14 on 3rd down. That awesome running game for Iowa State was just totally manhandled. They produced just 19 yards on 25 attempts. I know Iowa State's quarterback got hurt. He's day-to-day. I certainly hope he can play the Oklahoma game. But his injury really did not change the complexion of the game because Cyclones weren't moving the ball before he went out. And then the Gophers held that electric Jeff Tedford offense to under 300 yards. They'd been really one-dimensional. Fresno was really bad on third down as well. So two defenses that through 2 weeks look pretty good.
Yeah, for Minnesota, first of all, Antoine Winfield Jr.'s interception in the end zone was one of the greatest plays I've ever seen. And I hate saying that about a Gopher, but that pick was absolutely out of this world. Unfortunately for the Goofs, though, they're going to be down with they're losing their top two running backs. Their backup, Shannon Brooks, was already out for the season because of a leg injury he suffered during the offseason. And their starter, Rodney Smith, now is out with what looks like an ACL injury. So they're going to be down to a true freshman, Bryce Williams, for the rest of the season. So we're going to have to see how that lays out. Coach, for your second slant, I know that you wanted to follow up on one of the other bigger matchups from the weekend, Mississippi State heading over to the Little Apple at Manhattan.
Yeah, absolutely. I watched a little bit of this, or a good chunk of this actually, before I started flipping around and realized Oklahoma was on, and I watched a lot of that beat down. But Nick Fitzgerald returned to the field, and that meant that took some of the pressure off of Kylan Hill, and Hill ran for 211 yards and accounted for 3 scores, running and catching. So let's just say that the running game was working. But Fitzgerald back there, I think was a huge factor in that much success in the run game. Fitzgerald threw for 154 and 2 touchdowns. He ran for another 160 himself. As they piled up 540 yards on the road in a Power 5 game, which is impressive. So Moorhead's got those guys rolling, and it was just fun to watch. Just kind of a spread team. Mississippi State had always been kind of that team that's lying in the weeds, but when it was time to underachieve, they would underachieve, and then occasionally, here we go, it's time to rise up. Well, they're going to rise up. But I think this is going to be a more stabilized, more consistent version of the Mississippi State Bulldogs. And to be honest with you, if I'm judging just a very small 2-game sample size, I think as of right now this could fall right on its face after I say this, but I think Joe Moorhead was the right guy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think Joe Moorhead has been, of the new hires, one of the best so far this season.
And I would be remiss if I didn't also mention a couple of things before I before we move on. Another interesting matchup in the SEC was Wyoming coming to Missouri. And Missouri actually rolled up 40 points. They won 40-13. Drew Lock was 33 of 45 for 398 and 4 touchdowns. So I thought that was an interesting score line there. And also an FCS score line that was a game happening Thursday night. Kennesaw State they hosted Tennessee Tech. And let's just say they were not gracious hosts. They rushed for 507 yards en route to a 42-7 victory over the Owls of Tennessee Tech. So, no, Golden Eagles. The Owls are Kennesaw State. My bad.
All right.
But yeah, so a couple interesting things happening. A couple fun games that were kind of off the radar a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we love the FCS games here. So my second slant's going to be a little bit longer than the typical slant because I need to get some stuff off of my chest. Guys, I made some bad predictions at the beginning of the year, and so I got a couple mea culpas that I got to just sort of get off my chest and apologize to both you guys as my co-hosts and the listeners. The first one of these was my first big mistake, I should say, was picking Purdue to finish as the runner-up in the Big Ten West. Josh, you've already talked about this game a little bit with Purdue's defense preventing them from winning. But after being competitive but ultimately losing to Northwestern in week 1, this week Purdue completely dropped the ball against Eastern Michigan, a school that we all picked to be a middle-of-the-pack MAC team. Elijah Sindelar has been absolutely dreadful behind center for the Boilers. In 2 games, he's completing only 59% of his passes. He's thrown for 3 picks and only 2 touchdowns. The guy he's splitting time with, David Blau, has not been much better. Even though he's completing nearly 70% of his passes, he's just barely averaging 4.5 yards per attempt, which is pretty dreadful, and he still has yet to throw for a score. Also, question for Jeff Brom. Why did Rondale Moore, who had about as an electric a debut possible in their opener when he broke the school record for all-purpose yards in a game, why did he only touch the ball 5 times against Eastern? Things are not going to be getting any easier for them over the next 2 weeks either. That Drew Lock team that Coach just mentioned in Mizzou, they're coming to town next week, followed by a visit from my no longer enemies from BC in week 4. My second mea culpa concerns Pitt. I'm always a little bit more bullish on Pitt than most, and I don't really have an explanation as to why that is, but I've always just had a soft spot for the Panthers. Coming into the season, I picked them to be the runner-up to the U in the ACC Coastal. Boy, oh boy, though, I got a feeling I might be wrong on that one. After struggling to pull away against FCS also-ran Albany in their opener, Pitt was honestly embarrassed Saturday night by the Nittany Lions to the tune of 51-6. Now, the score is a little bit more dramatic than the underlying numbers would probably indicate. Pitt actually won the time of possession battle by about 9 minutes and were within 90 total yards of Penn State, but they were undermined by a couple of things. First of all, penalties. They were flagged 14 times for 116 yards. You're never going to win a game when you have that many flags thrown your way. And secondly, Kenny Pickett is clearly not the answer at quarterback. I can't believe I'm actually saying this, especially as a Buffalo Bills fan, but Nathan Peterman isn't walking through those doors. I know conditions were bad, and for that game, it was an absolute muck fest. But still, completing only 50% of your passes, forget this, 3 yards per attempt. No scores, a pick, and 4 sacks. That is a genuinely awful quarterback line. I also want to apologize to Mike the Pirate. I said that he was going to be the first coach fired in the Pac-12 this season. Clearly, I was wrong there. Wazoo is 2-0. They beat a Wyoming team that I really like in week 1, and they pitched a shutout against San Jose State last week. Now, the Spartans aren't exactly a powerhouse, but a goose egg is a goose egg nonetheless. I'm a little bit concerned about the fact that they threw for 3 picks, but if your defense is going to play like that and hold an FBS team, any FBS team, to 109 total yards, you're going to win most of your game. So I will tip my tricorn hat to you, Mike Leach, and as well to the big man in charge of the defense, Tracy Claeys. And finally, sticking in the Pac-12, I want to apologize to Mike McIntyre in Colorado for predicting that they would not make a bowl and would finish second to last in the Pac-12 South, just ahead of Arizona State, who we'll be talking about here in a little bit. I did not realize that Steven Montez would take a huge step forward and that Laviska Shenault Jr. would stay kicking game with a capital G. This cat against Nebraska had 177 yards. Receiving, which gives him the 6'2" sophomore from DeSoto, Texas, 21 catches and 388 yards through 2 games this season. Scott Frost did not get off to the start that he had hoped for in his debut against Colorado for Nebraska, especially because Adrian Martinez went down, and the former UCF head coach is still whinging a little bit about the hit in the supposed twist of Martinez's leg at the bottom of the pile. I've watched the video. It's questionable at best. I think that Frost needs to stop complaining. It's a shame that Martinez got injured, but injuries happen in football. So, Josh, before we hit this pop quiz, you want to hit us off with your other 2 questionable coaching choices?
Definitely. So, Coach, end of the first half of that Minnesota-Fresno State game, Gophers hit a field goal to go up 10-0. There's just 58 seconds left. I'm wondering what the conversation is on the sideline because, the Fresno kick returner decided to take it out of the end zone, fumbled it at the 7-yard line. His team luckily recovered. Then Fresno was confused about things, used their last timeout before even snapping a play. And then since they were pinned way back at their own 7-yard line, they just ran 2 conservative plays. Well, that's got to be about the worst case scenario without giving up further points. What type of conversation did the special teams coordinator, Jeff Tedford, evidently not have?
Well, I think the lack of communication was between the special teams coordinator or, in some cases in college programs, the guy who's over kickoff return. He probably forgot to mention, if it doesn't look like a good situation, just take a knee and we'll take the ball at the 25. He didn't listen. He decided to run it out. It was almost completely catastrophic, but, all in all, it was just a waste of a possession. And if I'm Jeff Tedford, I'm not happy. And that you can't do that. If there's any doubt with the touchback rules, just take a knee. I mean, it's that simple. Just take a knee.
And with the new fair catch rules, too.
Yeah, and get the ball on the 25, and let's rock and roll. But,
all right. So then this was my last one, and to me this was the most egregious decision of the week. Tied 21-all in the third quarter of the game. Western Kentucky has a 4th and 1 at their own 15-yard line.
So the minus 15, right?
Yes. So they're, 15 yards, heading the opposite direction. So they're facing.
I refer to it plus or minus in case you're wondering.
Okay, perfect.
Like anything north of 50 yards is the minus.
There we go.
Side, and the plus side is anything on the plus end of the 50. So like if you have 40 yards to go, you're on the plus.
Love it. Well, Western was facing 85 yards to go.
Okay.
4th and 1, they ran it and didn't get it, and gave Maine very short field. Maine needed all of one play, 6 seconds, to take a lead that they would not relinquish as the Black Bears started a very surprising 2-0, knocking off FCS heavyweight New Hampshire a week ago, and then FBS Sunbelt team, Conference USA team, Western Kentucky. Coach, I wanted to be a little aggressive for my first one with USC at about approaching midfield. I'm going the opposite way. This is just insanity, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're on the minus 15. Just, you're tied. And what was the quarter situation again?
It was midway through the third.
Okay, so you still have plenty of time. Punt it. Let your defense shut them out, go 3 and out, and get the ball back. You have more scholarships than they do. Punt it. It's okay to punt occasionally.
So is it fair that any Western Kentucky blogger, journalist calling for their coach's head, they're in the right on this one?
I wouldn't go that far, but yeah, it's pretty boneheaded, though. I will say that. That's pretty I don't want to say boneheaded. It's more reckless than anything. It's more like, oh, well, they're an FCS team. We can go for it from anywhere on the field. So.
Yeah, man. Black Bears, baby. They're off to a 2-0 start. They beat New Hampshire. Now they've beaten Western Kentucky. They are off to a tear.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Gentlemen, get out your number 2 pencils. It's pop quiz time.
Oh, man. You can study.
It's okay. I think you guys will do pretty well on this one. Mm-hmm. Okay. So this week with the AP poll coming out on Sunday marked the 107th week that Alabama was number 1 in the AP poll, giving them sole position of number 1, breaking their tie with the Ohio State University. But at this point, gentlemen, there are 21 schools that have been in the AP poll for more than 100 weeks, but have never reached number 1. So 100 weeks in the AP poll, but never reaching number 1. Name those 21 schools. I will start with you, Josh.
All right. So just to clarify, this is the most weeks in the AP poll with never being ranked in the top 10.
No, ranked number 1.
Ranked number 1. Okay.
Without being ranked number 1.
Okay. Let's see.
Minimum of 100 weeks. It's there are 21 schools that have done it.
Okay. So any team that's won a national title, coach, we can just toss out the window.
Mm-hmm. Mind you, the AP poll started in 1938.
Yeah. Okay. So I am going to say that I believe our alma mater is in that dubious group, Mr. Perkins. So I'm going to go with Wisconsin.
That is incorrect. Wisconsin actually has been number one. They were number one, I believe, back in 1962 or 63 when they played USC in the Rose Bowl and lost a heartbreaker.
Well, that's a quick strike onto you, Coach. This is a stumper.
Well, I know Georgia, my alma mater, is definitely not one of them because they were ranked number one at one point last season. And, of course, in 1980, they were ranked number one when they won the national championship. So it's not them. It's definitely not Notre Dame. I can tell you that with certainty.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely not the U. So here's what I'm going to say. Most weeks ranked in the AP poll, but never being ranked number one, I'm going to say, and is it consecutive or just?
No, just total.
Just total? I'm going to ask, was oh God, this is going to be a terrible guess. I'm going to say, was Georgia Tech ever ranked number one even when they won their national championship?
Is your guess Georgia Tech?
Yes.
That would be an excellent guess because they are the school with the most weeks in the poll without being number one. 307 weeks in the AP poll, never achieved number one, highest ranking number two.
All right.
Okay. Well, Coach, I'm really glad you added Georgia because the school that came to me, Beamer Ball, lot of weeks in the poll. It's the 70s and 80s, back when Beamer was getting the thing turned around. But that Michael Vick team never won a national title. He never played for another one. So I'm going to go with Virginia Tech.
Great guess, Josh. They are number two, 296 weeks without number one.
All right, there we go.
Yay. Okay. So, this is a really good one. So the Huskies have been really good lately.
The Huskies of Washington?
Yes. I'm gonna go off the wall and say they've been good in random decades and random years, but I'm gonna say they're probably towards the bottom of this list. So I'm gonna guess they're the 21st ranked school on this list. So I'm gonna go with the Washington Huskies.
No, actually, Washington won a title in 1990, I believe, or 89, 90, 91, sometime right around there. They've actually spent 435 weeks in the polls, and they've been ranked number one before.
Oh, okay. It was Colorado that shared with Georgia Tech in 1990.
Yeah, no. Washington won a title sometime there in the late 80s, early 90s. I don't remember exactly which year.
Nice.
Josh.
Yeah.
One strike each.
Okay. So I don't know much about their history pre the coach that got them amazing, but since Urban Meyer and then Kyle Whittingham, Utah's been phenomenal, but I don't remember them ever being even like a top 2 or 3 team.
That is correct. Utah has spent 115 weeks in the poll, but their highest rank is number 2.
Okay.
So
was that the Whittingham team or was that the Urban Meyer team?
I believe that was one of the Whittingham teams that started off like 8 or 9-0.
Nice.
I don't have that in front of me though. It doesn't tell my information tell me when they reached their peak.
Ah.
All right, Coach.
I'm gonna stay in the same region of the country. They were once conference mates, but no longer.
I think you're picking my next guess.
They play on the Smurf turf.
Well, I got to find my next guess.
they've been ranked since probably before this, but they've been ranked for as long as I can remember, since 2006, but have never been ranked number 1. That is the Boise State Broncos.
That is correct. They've spent 142 weeks in the polls, highest ranked number 2. Well done, Coach.
All right. So on to me. I am going to say that between their current coach routinely winning 9 to 10 games, but never the conference, and before that having Les Miles, and before that, not immediately before Les Miles, but at some point having Jimmy Johnson, Oklahoma State has had a ton of good coaches, but has always been a bridesmaid.
That would be a great choice, Josh. They've spent 238 weeks in the polls, but their peak has been number 2.
All right.
Well done.
I'm going to stay in the same conference. I don't think this team has ever won a national championship, as far as I know.
You're right. Iowa State has never won a national championship.
So I'm going to just cut to the chase and say TCU.
TCU. No. TCU hit number 1 a couple of years ago, actually, I think, for 1 week. They've been in the polls for 241 weeks and have hit number 1 at least at one point.
1 week?
Mm-hmm.
That's so lame.
All right, Josh. I will say though, I will give you guys a hint. The most fertile conferences for these are definitely the Big 12 and the Pac-12. You've already hit one Big 12, one Pac-12 team, but there are more where those came from.
Josh,
Matt,
it's not the Fighting Track Stars.
Matt, you mentioned earlier the year the AP poll started. May I have that again, or is that cheating?
38.
1938. Okay. So that helps my next guess, because being a Big Ten blogger and looking at the history of coaches a few years back, there's a team I noticed that has a boatload of conference titles, but they haven't had much national success since the Galloping Ghost and Robert Zucke. I'm, believe it or not, going to go with the Fighting Illini.
That's a great choice, Josh. They've spent 181 weeks in the polls. They are peaked at number 2, but have never hit number 1.
But they have a bunch of national titles, but all their titles are from like the 20s and
the Red Grange era.
Yeah. I think they might have a random claimed one from after World War II, but I think it's for those kind of dubious ones.
Yeah. Coach, 2 strikes.
Oh, no pressure. So Big 12, Pac-12. So I'm going to go, since Jim Harbaugh took over, they've not been ranked number 1. But they've been ranked, I feel like, ever since Jim Harbaugh took over. That is the Stanford Cardinal.
Great choice, Coach. Stanford has been in the polls for 297 weeks, but has never reached number 1. Their high is number 2. They are number 3 on this list.
Nice. I am going to go with a program that was phenomenal in the 1980s with a little bit of an asterisk. And they were really, really good in like the 20s and 30s. I'm going to go with a little bit of a gamble and say the SMU Ponies.
Ooh, SMU. Sorry, Josh. SMU has hit number 1 at least for 1 week before. They've been in the polls for 161 weeks, and they've at least hit at number 1 once.
Might have been during the Doak Walker years then.
2 strikes apiece.
Okay. Well, that's why it was a gamble. I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel.
When you said really good in the 80s, I thought you were going somewhere else. That would have been a good guess, but you know.
Well, okay, good in the 80s. All right, let's see. Well, Pittsburgh was ranked number 1.
Josh, Coach, you're up.
Yeah, thanks, Dan Marino. Laces out, Dan. So my next guess, I'm going to stay in the same conference, and I'm going to head north to Eugene. And I'm going to say the Oregon Ducks under Chip Kelly.
Oregon has definitely been ranked number 1. Oh yeah, no, they've spent 284 weeks in the polls, and they've been ranked number one. I think they hit a number one ranking with Joey Harrington at one point.
Were they favored against Auburn? They might have been. They might have been the number one team in that game.
No, Auburn was the number one team in that game.
That's why I guessed them, because that I felt like that was their peak.
No, unfortunately for you, Coach, the Ducks have been number one. All right, Josh, you need a correct guess to win it here.
I need a correct guess to win. What happens if I get an incorrect guess?
Then we go to sudden death.
Then we go to sudden death. Okay. Let's see. I'm trying to think of some teams that have been really good, but no. I know it's not the exact same as being number one, but I'm just trying to think of teams that, as far as I know, have never won a national title. And let's see. There is a couple that come to mind. And I am going to say, I'm going to say Virginia. How's that?
Ooh, Virginia is an interesting choice, but unfortunately, Josh, they have hit number one at some point. So
when were they number one?
I don't know. I can't tell you when they were number one, but
probably when they had the Barber twins.
Maybe I can't tell you, but I can tell you that they've been number one at some point. All right, rapid fire. Clock's running, Coach. Throw out of school.
No pressure. No, not Penn State.
I need an answer.
Penn State was ranked number one throughout the 80s.
I know. That's why I said not Penn State. Iowa.
Iowa. No,
Iowa
we won
a national title in the 50s there, buddy.
I
Josh?
was hoping you won it as the number two team.
No. The number two team was LSU, because LSU lost their bowl game and Iowa didn't, and yet LSU likes to claim that as a bowl game. That is, as a natty, that is some straight up BS, if you ask me.
What year was that, Josh? 59?
Yeah, that was the 58 season.
Okay,
so
yeah.
Iowa won the 59 Rose Bowl right there, baby.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I need a team. All right. I kind of felt good about some ACC stuff, even though I missed with Virginia. But there was another team that comes to mind. This might surprise people, but they played in a Rose Bowl in the 1940s. They were awesome in the 50s. They're known as a basketball school now, but prior to World War II, they were known as a football school, and that is the Duke Blue Devils.
The Dukies! That is correct. 172 weeks in the polls. Duke has reached a high of number 2. Josh,
I've been on the schneid. I lost the last 2 weeks in embarrassing fashion.
So you have won. The teams you guys missed: West Virginia, Arizona State, Kansas State, Baylor.
Kansas State was straight up my next guess.
Houston,
nice.
South Kakalaki, Arizona, North Carolina State, Washington State, Texas Tech, Louisville, Navy.
Oh.
And drumroll, please, with 109 weeks in the polls, yet never reaching number 1, only reaching number 2, your Kansas Jayhawks.
Nice.
With the John Riggins era.
Louisville was floating in my mind. I mean, they've had some good coaches. They had Schnellenberger. They had,
two stints of Petrino.
Yep, they've been rising up and up. They had a Heisman Trophy winner. I just never pulled the trigger on them. I wish I had.
Yep. Charlie Strong had a couple good years there.
Yep.
All right. Well, let's hit some deep roots.
That was a good one, Coach.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's hit some deep roots then. And we'll start, Coach. We celebrated your birthday in style on Saturday with buffalo chicken dip, banquet beer, and a demolition of the Gamecocks by your dogs. What struck me most while watching this one together, Coach, was how one-dimensional Georgia's defense made South Carolina become. They had less than zero running game, and they made Jake Bentley drop back 48 times. What stood out to you in this decisive 41-17 victory?
Well, just the sheer ferocity of that defensive front. I mean, I haven't seen a defensive front that fast in the black and red, and it was incredible. And they put pressure. They were hitting Jake Bentley all day long. Deebo Samuel couldn't do anything when he tried to run those jet sweeps that he's been successful with against everybody else in the past. Just sheer, they couldn't block them. I mean, they couldn't. It didn't matter who Georgia threw in there; they could not block them. And Tyler Clark was probably the main one. Of that defensive front, Monty Rice, Jawan Taylor, Natrez Patrick at the linebacker positions, all had stellar days. Jawan Taylor picked up a fumble on DeAndre Baker's first pick six. But it was incredible just just the speed in which they came off the ball and just hit. It's how violent they were.
Josh, how big of a setback do you think this is for South Carolina? Do you think they can pick up the pieces and still make a run for second place in the East?
They never were a contender. They're too young. They're too early on any potential rebuild for Muschamp. I was surprised they were ranked, quite frankly. I think this will sting for a week, but hey, if they win 8-9, even maybe somehow get to 10 wins, I think we'll just look back on this and see it as a bad day. But the one thing that I did find interesting for such a lopsided game is, just kind of looking at some of the stuff that Georgia was doing. They're only 40% on third down. An overly impressive day by Jake Fromm. It was impressive just how lopsided the game became, like Coach said, because of the one-dimensionality of the Gamecocks. This wasn't like Georgia Tech dropped 700 offensive yards and was just picking them apart. It was a weird grinder that got lopsided. You don't really see that happen sometimes.
Yeah, I was surprised that we didn't see a whole lot of Justin Fields in this one. We got glimpses of him, but this was definitely the Jake from State Farm show.
Well, when you're 15 of 18, you're extremely efficient, and it just why? You're a veteran. You're on the road. At some point in the second quarter, South Carolina was actually showing some signs of life, at least defensively. They were getting pressure on Fromm. They were making sacks. They were making tackles for loss. And then just all of a sudden, the depth took over, and Georgia's offensive line just physically overpowered them.
All right. Well, moving on, Josh, you already talked about one of the questionable coaching decisions from this one, but Saturday night's headliner was JT Daniels' first road game for USC. They went up to the Farm in Palo Alto, and Daniels played about as well as you expect any high schooler to play against a Stanford defense that was simply dominant on Saturday night. Daniels was 16 for 34, 215 yards and 2 picks, sacked 4 times for a loss of 28 yards, and just never looked comfortable in the pocket. Josh, what specifically were the Cardinals able to do to expose him?
Well, I think part of it was Stanford just made USC so one-dimensional. 114 rushing yards, but they needed 37 carries to get there. That's not a particularly effective day at the office, and that created a pretty one-dimensional USC Trojan team. So that played a big part of it. And yeah, I think Stanford just did a really good job of disguising some of the stuff they were doing. And as the game kind of never really got away from USC because it was only a 14-point game, but as the offense continued to flounder, I thought Daniels then sort of did what you always dread a freshman quarterback doing, and that's getting into the interception column. And just as a comparison, Zach Annexstad over at Minnesota, he wasn't that good against Fresno. He had 0 touchdowns, but the big thing is 0 interceptions. And to me, that's the biggest thing that freshman quarterback do to hurt their team. It's not necessarily the huge mistake. It's just a whole bunch of little ones. And eventually it caught up to USC and those 2 picks.
Yeah, Coach, one of the things watching this game, probably the thing that annoys me the most about Stanford is they run this play that they call they call the downhill toss, is when quarterback's under center and they do like a quick toss to the running back who then runs basically off tackle.
It's power toss.
Yeah, power toss, whatever you want to call it. But instead of having handoff, it's this toss. And when they do this, what happens? I mean, LSU has been running this play seemingly for decades now, but one of the reasons that you give you do the handoff is because it allows the running back to start going downhill. But if the toss is off even by 6 inches, the running back has to either like stutter step or break out of his natural downhill motion, and it completely defeats the purpose. I saw Stanford run this play seemingly 100 times. They scored a touchdown on it, but they also got stopped for 1 yard, no gain behind the line at least a half dozen times. Why do teams keep running this play, Coach?
I don't know. Like, they feel like I guess they feel like exactly what you said. You get the ball in the hands of the running back quicker, and he can get straight downhill, and they're usually pulling guys and kicking guys, but I really, honestly, I don't see the benefit in it, and I kind of agree with you. That annoys me a little bit too, because it's like if you're going to toss it, the idea of a toss is to quickly get the ball, quickly and effectively get the ball to the perimeter. That's how I see it. But again, there's probably something to this play that all of us are missing, including myself. But I don't like it.
Yeah, it's driving me crazy. Well, anyways, Stanford looked like they are the class of the Pac-12, after this completely dominant performance. Let's move on, though. In what turned out to be a thriller, Texas A&M came almost all the way back against Clemson, but ended up falling just short, losing 28-26. Kellen Mond lit up that vaunted Clemson defense. 430 yards and 3 scores. More importantly, 0 turnovers, and only got sacked once. Coach, what made the Aggies so successful against this Clemson defense that most people think is if not the best, one of the 2 or 3 best units in the country?
Well, I think that last stat you mentioned, no sacks. That means Kellen Mond, who we knew was talented coming in. That was no secret. And he's a dual threat guy. He can, he's a pass first, but the ability to run type deal.
He's improved as a passer from last year to this year. It is noticeable. His mechanics are way cleaner. His accuracy seems to be way up from last year. He's jumped by leaps and bounds over how he looked last year.
That's what happens when you get protection too. I mean, that helps. And he had a phenomenal second half as well. You could tell some of the experience was coming through. And even though they fell short, I mean, he was nothing less than spectacular, and it was a thing of beauty to see. But he is, like, you're exactly right. He is leaps and bounds, night and day, whatever other stupid analogy you want to use. He was tremendous on Saturday night, and I'm starting to become a believer in this Texas A&M team. I'm not necessarily rooting for him, but I'm starting to kind of become a believer in, hey, they might be onto something here. So watch out for them. I think whatever you want to say bad about Jimbo, he does know what he's doing. He is a good coach. He might be a little shady, but he's good if you just strip it down to only football. He's really good.
Yeah, he has some serpentine qualities about his personality. But yes. Josh, what did you notice in this one?
What a couple takeaways. Everyone's talking about how amazing Clemson's offense should be with, the embarrassment of riches between Trevor Lawrence and Kelly Bryant, and an offense was not very good. The running game was really, really bad. Travis Etienne, just 8 carries. Why does your lead back only have 8 carries? I don't get that. I thought Clemson was lucky to win this game. It felt like one of those weird times when Nick Saban outcoaches himself. There were times where it looked like Dabo Swinney was outcoaching himself. So that was a takeaway for me. The other one is football is just a sport that awards aggressiveness. You're the more aggressive wide receiver, you get held, you're going to get the pass interference. And everything tends to favor being bold in the sport, yet when you fumble into the end zone reaching for the pylon, you lose possession. It's a goofy rule. It didn't really cost Texas A&M because they did get the touchdown back eventually and then had the failed 2-point conversion. But I don't know, Coach. Do you think that's a rule that should ever be changed or looked at? It just seems weird that, you reached out, you dropped it, give it to the other team, even if you're running into the end zone.
So what do you say? Do you just get it back where the ball's spotted? Because, I mean...
I would be fine with that. I would also be fine with it going to the 3-yard line.
That wouldn't be a bad idea.
I'd even be open to being a touchback so you get the ball back at the 20. But the team that was on offense still gets the ball back.
At the minus 20? So you have to go 80 more yards?
No, so you only have to go 20 more yards.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah. It just seems
sort of
weird.
like a reverse touchback, if you will.
Yeah. It's just weird because the whole sport is emphasizing more and more scoring. And, like I said, the sport has tended to award bold action except for that one rule.
Yeah, well, it's odd because for 100 yards of the field, it's out where you get it where it goes out. So he was essentially 2 inches away from ball at the 1 instead of Clemson ball at the 20. So that is the part that bothers me the most because it's not really a consistent rule. I think they need to, treat it as such. Like if you fumble, if they're going to make that the rule, then make sure every time you fumble out of bounds, it turns over. Or on the flip side, make sure they, just create a situation in which the offense does not lose possession of the ball. They just get it, they lose the penalty in fumbling through the end zone as you lose yardage. And, maybe that's where you go.
Yeah, well, that was obviously a controversial call there, but at the end of the day, I still think that the better team won the game, but it was way closer than I think any of us expected it to be.
It's funny. Clemson went hard for Kellen Mond to just think how much better they would look actually with him.
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a pretty good point.
Here's the deal. I think it's too. Trevor Lawrence is obviously the more talented quarterback, but it's just too early for him. I don't think he has the poise and maturity and the experience and seasoning as Kelly Bryant. And Kelly Bryant is clearly less talented than Lawrence. But when Lawrence finally kind of settles down, you'll see a jump in this Tiger offense. I promise you.
All right. Well, for those of you who are enjoying Pac-12 After Dark, you got a fun, albeit ugly at time games out there in the desert where Herm Edwards and the Sun Devils knocked off Michigan State 16-13. Temperatures at kickoff were over the century mark, even though the sun had already set. But that heat did not translate to points on the field. Even though his stat line ended up being pretty good, though, Josh, I thought Brian Lewerke looked just off all night. So what did the Sun Devils do to slow down Sparty and the rest of that Michigan State offense?
They showed up.
Yeah, it might have been partly Sparty. This is also now a theme, really, since LJ Scott's impressive freshman year, which is what in the world is the Michigan State running attack doing? He had 7 carries for 19 yards, one of his worst days of his career. As a team, 63 yards on 27 carries. Look, Brian Lewerke has really improved as a passer, and I might be as surprised as anyone. I did not expect him to develop into this good of a throwing quarterback. But like you said, Matt, his stat line ended up being impressive, but it kind of went all for naught. He had the pick. Team wasn't balanced. And then sloppy 2 weeks in a row of just the team being all over the map defensively. But then add this in, 9 penalties, 82 yards. They doubled up Arizona State in the one stat you don't want to double up your opponent in. This Michigan State team feels like they got to go back to basics.
Yeah.
And just figure out the small stuff and your run blocking scheme, being more disciplined on defense. To me, it almost looks at times that they know they're so talented individually that they're no longer playing good team defense. They're almost doing like 11 dudes playing hero ball out there and not maintaining discipline on a zone, not relying on the safety coverage in man-to-man, things like that, and it's biting them.
Yeah, and maybe we should have seen this coming. Arizona State is undefeated at home against Big Ten teams now. They are 10-0 in their history. But Coach, we all expected for Herm Edwards to fall flat on his face. The Devils are 2-0.
I mean, say what you want about Herm Edwards, and
we have. We definitely have.
Poke fun at him all we want, but the fact of the matter is that this guy just proved that, hey, I still know football, and football is football, and something is clicking with him and these kids. Something is resonating in his message. He's doing something right, and I think we may see. This might come back and bite me in the butt. I don't know, but we may see that it was actually all along college was the better fit for him because he's more of a teacher. Now, since he's been with ESPN, he has had some very limited coaching experience.
Yeah, he coached in a bunch of those All-American games, right?
Yeah, and he's one of his strong suits is he's always been a really good teacher of the game. So maybe that's the I don't know. Maybe that's the thing that gets him over the hump. But again, the true test will be, can he recruit? And we'll see if that play out. If he can't recruit, then it doesn't matter how well he can teach.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, finally, Coach, you got some good birthday presents this weekend, but I think the best one that you got was Kentucky beating Florida in the Swamp.
Oh yes,
that happened for the first time since you were in diapers. Benny Snell and JUCO transfer quarterback Terry Wilson were absolutely outstanding for the Wildcats. They combined for 285 yards on the ground. Coach, Florida's offense looked great in their opener. So what did Kentucky do to hold Felipe Franks and the rest of the Gators to only 16 points?
Well, they just said, you know what, Felipe Franks, you're just going to be Felipe Franks. Really, I mean, honestly, they put pressure on him both offensively and defensively. They did things with Benny Snell, 27 carries, 175 yards. They put a lot of pressure on Florida's offense, just with what they were doing on the other side of the ball. They blitzed and they did all sorts of things to disrupt Felipe Franks' rhythm. And, it's just one thing after another. And next thing you know, they get momentum. And then once you get momentum, Benny Snell's not a guy that you want to try to stop, especially late in the game when you're trying to make a comeback, because he's going to find all of those holes and things like that. What also hurt was one of their big-time defensive ends, C.C. Jefferson, was suspended for academic issues. This was his second straight game that he missed. So that didn't help. And also, it just – I don't know. Mullen just had this befuddled look on his face a lot, and that let me know that he was a bit overwhelmed as well. So just a whole bunch of things that just lead you to believe that McElwain just left this program in a bigger mess than everybody realizes.
Josh, what did you pick up from this one?
I can't believe I'm doing this for the third game in a row, but look, if you have a quarterback that is not necessarily the greatest in the world, and Felipe Frank's really, really athletic kid, but in terms of being a pure passing quarterback, he's not the greatest in the world, you need to help them out by being balanced. Well, Franks was the leading rusher with 44 yards and had the most carries. So what are the running backs doing? What's the offensive line doing? What's the play calling to end up with 128 rushing yards, but needing 29 carries to do that? That's 4.4 yards per carry. When we think of like successful run offenses, you're up over 5 yards a game because for every, nickel and dime play you're having, you're ripping off a nice like 15, 20 yarder. Florida never really did that. So that was a takeaway for me of just not helping out your struggling quarterback. But my biggest takeaway, though, is Benny Snell is amazing, and we all know that. But quarterback Terry Wilson, really good with his feet as well. He had over 100 yards, really nice touch on some of his deep balls. And I'll tell you the scary thing if you're a Kentucky fan, or a scary thing if you're a Florida fan, Kentucky beat you despite having 2 giveaways. And how about this, Coach? 12 penalties for Stoops' team and 114 penalty yards, and they still found a way to not just win, but win by 2 scores.
That's just sad on Florida's part that you get all of those breaks and you can't do it because you're not balanced. Because you can't run the ball, because your quarterback who is mediocre or decent at best, you're putting the game in his hands. He can't do it, and the running game can't help him, and the offensive line are overwhelmed. And then defensively, they can't get off the field, and they can't even give the ball to your offense. And then when Kentucky tries to give it away, you say, I don't really want it. But this is the first time the Gators have lost an SEC opener since 2004 as well. So they had a nice little streak going with that too. So hats off to Kentucky, though. I mean, they had a great game plan. They executed for the most part. They were fortunate. They're not going to be able to commit 3 turnovers and have 1.5 million yards and penalties in the future and expect to be successful. But right now they're sitting at 2-0. They snapped a cajillion-year curse with the Gators. So hats off.
All right. Well, Josh, do you have any final words for us here to wrap up week 2?
Yeah, I do have one heartbreaking defeat for one of our favorite teams. I don't know why we buried the lead on this one, but the Razorbacks snapped one of the nation's longest winning streaks. One of the most impressive winning streaks, too, of one game. They just could not handle the altitude. They played an amazing 3 quarters. They looked like Alabama for 3 quarters, racing out to a 27-9 lead. Had a 27-17 lead entering the 4th quarter. They're just whooping up on Colorado State. They packed up the bus. Somehow they did not get the memo that this is a 4-quarter sport. And when it was all said and done, they gave up 389 passing yards, and Preston Williams had 154 receiving yards. But once Arkansas gets that NCAA rule changed to a 3-quarter game again, look out, Arkansas is going to start ripping off those long winning streaks again. Probably win 2 games in a row. And, I mean, that's just inconceivable.
Whew. Chad Morris, you might have to have him slow down for the rest of us to catch up. Coach, any final words from you here today?
Yeah, Rock Chalk Jayhawk, 1-1 on the season, 31-7 victory over Central Michigan. So I think what they did was, I think their method worked. They imported the track for their sideline. That's what they walked across to make them feel at home. And they certainly played that way. And I think they brought John Riggins out of retirement. I think he had one more year left of eligibility, so they dusted him off, and he rushed for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. One thing I do want to say quickly before we go about that Kansas game was I want to have a quick shout out to Puka Williams Jr. The freshman wasn't able to play in their first game, but he looked great for them. 14 carries, 125 yards, 2 touchdowns, phenomenal name. So just all around, rock chalk, baby. Rock chalk. And you know what, Josh? Week 3 is going to bring us just an absolute clash of the Titans. Do you know who Kansas plays in Week 3?
Ooh, are we burying the lead?
No.
Then I don't care.
They're playing Rutgers.
Oh God. Oh my God.
Hey, can we make that a deep root next week?
No, it
has to be a spread formation.
Oh, it has to be a spread formation. You know the rules.
How about both?
Just a reminder. Rutgers versus Ohio State was a conference game.
Yes, it was.
Despite the outcome.
What was the final score? 52-3, something like that?
I believe the final score is what we like to call a lot to a little.
Is that the scientific term?
Mm-hmm. It is.
All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for us tonight. So on behalf of our own offensive coordinator, the coach, Corey Burton, in Nashville, Tennessee, and our intrepid blogger from Big Ten and Counting, Josh Cook, up there in the Windy City, this is the professor in the Music City saying so long and see you next time on the Illegal Motion College Football Podcast.
Cy-Hawk.
Thanks for listening to the Illegal Motion College Football Podcast. To get in touch with the show, email us at illegalmotionpodcast@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter at illegal_motion.